What's going on, guys? My name is Wade with TechDaily. So I've had my Samsung Galaxy A72 for quite a while now, close to 2 months actually. And normally I wouldn't wait that long for an initial review like this, but I wanted to hold out a little longer in order to give this phone a fair shot. This is a device that's obviously the successor to one of, if not the most popular and, in my opinion, most important devices of 2020, the A71, a phone that I think set the stage for mid-range devices last year, put the A series on the map for Samsung, particularly here in the US. And because of all that, this A72 was a highly anticipated successor and potential upgrade that I know a lot of people might have been interested in. Unfortunately, while the A72 is a solid device, I don't necessarily think this is the upgrade we were expecting or hoping for. And furthermore, considering some of the other devices that are available now, even from Samsung, I don't know that the A72 is as appealing this year as the A71 was last year. Still, even with those caveats, the A72 is a great upper mid-range device. It does have some improvements and new features versus last year. It's still priced really well. It's a great bang for your buck device. I just think it's not quite as good as it could be, and I'll get into all that in this video. There's obviously a lot to talk about here, so I won't waste any more time. Let's just go ahead and get into it, and I'll let you guys know all my thoughts and opinions on the Samsung Galaxy A72. So first off, let's talk about pricing and availability and where this phone sits in the Samsung lineup. Now, when it first launched, the A72 was about a $450 device, which isn't too bad. Prices have already come down a little bit though, and you can actually snag one now for closer to $420 on places like Amazon. Price-wise, I think this phone is a solid deal and falls comfortably in that upper mid-range space. In Samsung's lineup, the A72 is technically currently the highest end A series phone, at least by model number. However, at least right now, there's just the one model of the A72, this here regular one. There's no A72 5G like how there was an A71 5G, and that presents this weird issue. There's a regular A52, and objectively this A72 is better than that phone. It makes sense so far, but there's also an A52 5G. And side by side, if you've seen my comparison video, spec-wise and feature-wise, the A52 5G is better in a lot of ways than the A72, beyond just that 5G support. And because of that, I guess technically, the A72 is not actually the highest end A series phone if you're looking at specs and features. The A52 5G is. So already, not only is the overall A series lineup a bit confusing at the moment, but you can kind of see why I don't necessarily think this A72 is the go-to top tier A series device this year. Of course, there's a bit more to consider: price point, carrier compatibility, availability in your region. It's not an easy black and white sort of issue. It's just something to think about with this phone, and it's why I don't necessarily think the A72 is the default top tier A series option like the A71 was last year. If you want to do some comparison shopping of your own though, I'll leave some links down below to all the deals and discounts for this phone, along with some other A series phones as well. Physically, the A72 falls in line with not only all the other A series devices this year, but also most of the top tier Samsung flagship phones as well now, which isn't a positive or a negative, I guess, just more a point of consistency within Samsung's phones. We obviously got a slightly refreshed design this year versus the A71. There's no more glass-stick shiny rainbow finish. It's just a simple matte plastic rear that matches even the S21 and Note 20. It's simple, it's durable, if also a little boring maybe, though I think this bright blue, or more appropriately, awesome blue, as Samsung calls it, is a nice color for this device. It's also held up really well. Unlike a glossy plastic, this matte look keeps the scratches away, and I haven't bothered to use a case on this phone at all. The sides and frame are a shiny polished metal, which I think balances out the look and feel. It's a good weight in the hand. It almost seems premium. And the boxy flat profile this year, with no more curved edges or display, I think makes this phone feel more comfortable in the hand and a little easier to grip as well. Also, one worthwhile addition to the build quality is an IP rating. This phone is water and dust resistant, a first for the A series, and all in all, I think the build and materials here collectively are pretty solid. There's also nothing missing with the physical features either. We get a headphone jack still on this device, there's expandable expandable storage. There's even dual stereo speakers for the first time as well, which deliver a fantastic out loud listening experience. This is something I personally value quite highly, so I was super happy to finally have it on this phone. And I think while certain flagship phones seem to either take things away or go back and forth each year on what's added to the phones, the A72 has all the basics, all the extras, really almost everything you need in a smartphone. Almost, though. There's still no wireless charging, which I don't consider to be a huge deal really. The more important point is just the fact that you still get a USB-C charger and cable in the box, unlike some $1,000 flagships. So that's nice to see at least. But all in all, this is still a really well-rounded smartphone. Underneath the display, you do get a fingerprint reader, and you can pair that up with Face Unlock as well for a secondary biometric unlocking option. Now, while I think the overall unlocking speeds are an improvement over last year, they still don't quite match up to the likes of the S21, obviously, or even the S20 FE, so that's a little bit of a bummer. I notice some inconsistencies every once in a while. There's a holdup from time to time. I'll have to adjust my grip, but like I said, overall, the biometrics with both fingerprint and Face Unlock are an improvement. They work pretty well. One way or another, you'll be able to get into your phone just fine. I think there was just still a little more room for improvement. Now, with the display itself, overall, I think this phone offers a stellar viewing experience, and this is something Samsung's A series devices have been known for now. And this time around, we do get even a little more with a new 90Hz high refresh rate option. This allows for a fast, fluid, and silky smooth experience with every tap, touch, and swipe. And I think for a device in this price range, this feature is a must-have this year. It's personally something I can't live without anymore, and even something I think most average everyday smartphone users would notice if given the chance to see a side-by-side comparison with a 60Hz device. The only downside is that, once again, in the overall lineup, the A52 5G offers a better 120Hz display. So as nice as it is that this 90Hz feature was added to the A72, it's just not quite the absolute definitive upgrade. To be fair though, the difference between 90Hz and 120Hz I think is tougher to see, and everything else with the display itself is still really great. It's a Super AMOLED panel, 2400 by 1080 resolution, it's bright, 800 nits of max brightness now, it's bold, it's colorful, most importantly, it's an upgrade over last year. And at 6.7 inches, you've got a lot of real estate to work with in viewing all your content. It's a fantastic viewing experience. It's just that there's technically some smartphones out there which are similarly priced that do offer a little more. Performance-wise, this I think is an area where the phone shines, even if the specs on paper maybe don't. Inside, this phone is powered by the Snapdragon 720G chipset, either 6 or 8 gigs of RAM, and 128 or 256 gigs of storage. Certainly an upper mid-range spec, and yeah, we can get nitpicky about the slight differences in Snapdragon 700 series chipsets. There's like 3 or 4 main different Snapdragon chipsets out there that are so similar, but generally speaking, this phone is plenty powerful for most everything you want it to do. In fact, there's nothing this phone can't do, at least from my own experience in using it. And having this device over the last couple of months has afforded me a fast and responsive Android 11 experience with virtually no issues. I also really like Samsung's One UI 3.1 for just your general day-to-day interactions. I think it's fluid, I think it's fast, and I think it's a nice upgrade. I think this phone is also enough of a powerhouse to play any and all games you want to play flawlessly. And this I think is where it makes way more sense to just save a ton of money while sacrificing very little on the performance side of things and going with the A72 instead of paying like twice as much or 3 times as much for an S series phone and gaining only a marginal and probably not so noticeable difference in performance. Now, yes, I think if you really want to get picky, the A72 probably deserved a little more with the processor. But is it something we would have noticed in day-to-day use? No, I don't really think so. I've gone back and forth on this, but in the end, I do think this phone is spec'd just about right for what it is and what it does, and even I think for its price point. The processor isn't the only thing you're paying for. After all, you have to look at the phone as a whole when you compare the price points, and as a whole, beyond just the processor, but also even looking at the internal specs and the overall performance, I think is still well worth the money. Also, the 5,000 milliamp battery inside this phone is plenty to get through more than a day's use under normal circumstances. I think for most people, this size battery is more than enough. For me personally, I was getting 12 to 14 hours of screen on time, and I use my phone quite a bit. What's sort of interesting is that this phone is a little thicker than last year. And I do think part of the reason is because of the slightly bigger battery. And this is a phone that I think can absolutely go the distance each and every day, no matter what it is you want to do with it. Finally, let's talk about all those cameras around back. And with this, I think just like last year, the A72 once again has a lot to offer and really shows how much effort Samsung has put into its cameras on its mid-tier devices. In years past, the A-series cameras were kind of a weak point. But with the A71, and especially with this A72 now, the results with the pictures and videos really are quite good. Hardware-wise, we get a 64 megapixel f1.8 aperture main shooter, a very useful 8 megapixel telephoto lens for up to 3 times optical zoom and 30 times digital zoom, the ever important 12 megapixel ultra-wide lens, and a 5 megapixel macro lens thrown on there for good measure. The selfie camera is also a respectable 32 megapixel lens, but all the specs aside, I think the results speak for themselves. This is a phone that overall offers a lot in the way of shooting modes, features, capabilities. It's maybe not quite the modern day flagship caliber, but it's like 2018 or 2019 flagship caliber. There's a lot to offer here and even more to like. I think this time around, Samsung made some changes that previous A-series users might notice. The ultra-wide shots are better, for example. They're more consistent, they're not so dark. The telephoto lens is super useful with its zoom capabilities and a much better add-on than the macro lens, which I never use, but that's still there too. I think Samsung improved on skin tones as well. There's still a lot of smoothing, but selfies look better. Portrait shots have improved as well with the background and foreground separation. All in all, this is a phone I've not only enjoyed shooting with, but often sometimes prefer over similar $400 to $500 smartphones. Again, Samsung has put a noticeable amount of effort into their camera capabilities anyway on these A-series phones. We saw it with the A71 last year, and they've continued it even further with the A72 this year. And all in all, this is a very capable camera setup on this phone. So if you couldn't tell, I've generally been very happy with the A72 these past couple of months. It's a great phone, and there's a lot to like. I think objectively, it's an improvement over the A71 in a lot of ways. There's added water resistance, dual speakers, a fresh design, 90 hertz display, of course, better cameras, all noticeable and worthwhile upgrades. And as a standalone device, I have no problem recommending it at its current price point. The only issue really is just that not only did Samsung kind of shoot themselves in the foot a little bit by releasing an A52 5G and not releasing an A72 5G, at least not yet, but there's also just so many other Samsung phones out right now and likely still upcoming for this year that I think the A72 now will kind of get lost in the shuffle or maybe squeezed out of the lineup. If you're considering a new phone and you have $400 to $500 to spend, you have a ton of options, which is great for you, but maybe not great news for the A72, simply because I'm not sure it's the outright best choice like the A71 was for a good chunk of the year last year. Overall, it's still a great device though, a fantastic option. If you have it, enjoy it. I certainly have, and if you're considering it, don't let me influence you too much, but if you have the option, maybe still look into the A52 5G instead, at least if it's available for you. So there you go. Those are my thoughts on the A72 right now. What do you guys think about this phone? Do you have one? If you do, I'd love to know your experience with it so far in the comments down below. But hopefully you guys did enjoy this video. Be sure to follow TechDaily on Twitter and subscribe to the TechDaily YouTube channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys later.